Now, first of all, we've stood on the backs of giants. So I'm going to honor the memory of those who went before us, Leonard Springfield, Professor James McDonald, etc. Talk a bit about their work and how it set the stage for what we're doing today. Then I'm going to talk about a brief SITREP situation report. The deep smell situation we currently find ourselves in, the reptilian overlordship, these recent efforts, ongoing efforts at depopulation, plugging everyone into the Borg collective via certain ingredients, right? And then talk about, okay, that's what's been going on. How do we turn this around? The time for research is over. It's time to get operational. And we happen to have a collection today, or during this week, of quite a few people who have had my lab off-world alternate timeline reality experiences. So what better place, and also to the viewing audience and the live streams and later in the archives, what better time to put forth my feelings about this. My personal intel requirements are not necessarily the same as anyone else's, but in a nutshell, what I'm going to talk about is this. There's going to be a lot of talk about remote viewing at this conference. The Farsight Institute has sent some members, and they've done some great work doing remote viewing about the death trap syndrome and about reptilians, what have you. And they also, like Brian pointed out, accurately predicted that there's going to be a worldwide wave, intensifying actually. The wave of UFO sightings has been going on for a few years now. It's just intensified. And they correctly predicted come November, we're going to see an intensification of that, which the lamestream media blithely explained away as being mere drones, right? But we know that they weren't, at least most of them. So I'm going to talk about what are the things I would like to see. If we do, for example, either a blind remote view targeted effort on, say, anyone in the audience or any particular person out there that we know out in the field, with their permission or with their oversoul's permission, because you can, without their knowing, you can ask their oversoul and you get a yay or a nay. If you get a nay, and then we have one or more remote viewers do a past life, if we have a strong feeling this individual, guy or gal, was involved in the Orion Wars and is currently undergoing, or has in the recent past undergone, MyLab operations, off-world ops, alternate reality ops, etc. If we do a blind remote view targeting on that individual of their past involvement as an ET in the Orion Wars, we can bring forth the information that they knew back then that's still in the information field. We can connect them, if they haven't already done so, with their past parallel ET counterparts who are still out there. I'll just offset frequency-wise from us, and we can begin to unpack a lot of information that has been previously denied to us due to these reincarnational mind swipes, what have you. So we get to understand the order of battle, table of organization of all the different ET races aligned against us. We begin to unpack and figure out the critical nodal points, the weaknesses and their alliances. A lot of times these beings, they use cosmic vassals, slavery. David Eckhart talks about this in the underground reptilian bases. He says, and I agree with him, that this is what I've heard also, that there's a number of other subordinate races, some are reptilian even, that do the heavy lifting for the reptilians, right?
Yeah.
What I see out of all that is there's inherent latent vulnerabilities in that. Some of those cosmic vassal ET groups or subterranean groups are probably tired of being used as slaves to advance this agenda of the reptilian controlling groups. Why not find, through some means, through tapping into someone's past parallel Orion War veteran lives, not only can we find out what they knew back then and bring it forward to the present, plug them, get them in contact with their actual counterparts and these past parallel counterparts of theirs, which are ETs, and then we can begin to unpack the alien symbol language. We know that the Air Force Security Service, since the early 1970s at least, Dan Sherman talked about this. He was in that program. where he was an intuitive communicator, getting these telepathic messages from these Zeta Greys he was tasked with sending and receiving messages to, mostly on the receiving end. So there's an existing stream of comms, of alien communications. By process of elimination and statistical probability, some of those people in the audience, and certainly some people watching the live stream, can not only write alien symbol language, they can probably read it at some level, right? The UFO crash, Aztec, New Mexico, Oppenheimer was part of that team that was brought in, of scientists and physicists, and he noted these symbols that were like streaming at the bottom of this view screen inside the craft. And he said these symbols look like Sanskrit, the ancient Hindu language, and he was an expert at that. He spoke it, and he studied it for years. Point being is that that information still exists not only in the information field, but within the energetic DNA field, the morphic resonance field of every individual who's been exposed to it, especially back when they were an ET. So what if potentially we could get a happy merger, at least, certain times, certain places, of these MyLabs today with their ET counterparts. Maybe even they can consent to letting their counterparts speak through them or write out the language and get some interpretation going on. Any kind of code breaking or decryption, cryptanalysis requires what they call a lot of depth. In fact, in other words, you need a lot of samples of a certain foreign code that you want to break, right? So, like Christy Campbell, you've had her on your show, and she's here, and she's constantly writing alien symbols. The late Becky Andreessen, she would stand in front of an alien computer terminal, for lack of a better term, and she would be working the controls, and these alien symbols would be playing on the screen. So at some level, in an altered state of being, altered state of mind, she can read and interact with those symbols. So why don't we tap into an existing information stream? It's there. And it's encoded within so many of these people, within probably our friend Nathan here, right? As an example. So let's find out through this means the history of the Orion Wars, the different times and places as an ET we participated in it. And like I'm going to point out in the talk, some of us have conducted what I call incarnational infiltrations. We deliberately, at an oversoul level, decided to incarnate into the Draco culture, into the Orion culture, for example, and other kind of nefarious, parasitic type civilizations. There's the best operative is one who doesn't know he's an operative. So when we incarnated into those civilizations, we did the same heinous, dastardly, evil things they did. We'd look at a place that stick out like a sore thumb if we didn't do the things that they did. And from a conscious level, we would just be acting on our genetic programming. But at an oversoul level, and we can draw a direct parallel with that, with our earthly incarnations. Some of us were Vikings, some of us were Romans, some of us were Mongols. We were invaders, we were conquerors. Let's not be ashamed of that. We are the sum of all of our parts. This is a war that we're involved in. It's a multiple threat environment. We're being hit by so many attack vectors from so many directions. So let's stop researching. Let's go operational. Let's start to unpack this alien language that many of us know at some deep level. Let's bring back the information, the historical database. People talk about the Akashic records. There has to be a database somewhere that we can plug into with the benefit of connecting with our past parallel lives that were involved in the Orion Wars. Let's stop talking about portals. Let's start going through them like the Sasquatch do, and like some of the Native American shamans and the Aboriginal elders. So they do this all the time. They like, instead of going through the laborious process of modern day travel, what passes for it, let's just go old school and go through portals like the way we used to. And then we can find critical infrastructure nodes, critical nodes that if you hit one and you hit it hard, it will create a cascading effect that will start to undermine their whole system. I may seem somewhat ambitious, but I want to dismantle this whole paradigm. And it's not just And this must be done also. Rescuing the children in the underground bases, rescuing the children in the on-world and off-world trafficking operations. But there's an infinite number, underlined 3 times, infinite number of trapped souls who have been taken in by this alien grid control system. So it's not just humans that we've got to rescue. There are countless alien souls, human souls, that are held in storage, for lack of a better term. The ones that are not malevolent, let's say, if we can find repositories of them, of beings that are just, their souls just entrapped all this time, and we release them, that's that many more potential allies we have. You see, so I'm looking at dismantling this whole system, hit a number of key infrastructure nodal points, creating a cascading effect. Why should my ambitions, or what I would like to see, why is that any more impossible or fantastical than what's happened the last several years? Billions of people walking around with nanotech systems, swimming through their bloodstream and latching onto their major organs, and and all this stuff going on, corpses and countless cemeteries around the world, giving off Bluetooth signals. For what?
Yeah, right.
For what? And those bioengineered structures, they're still growing in these corpses. And what does that mean? They're going to bloody come alive and zombify us, or what? I mean, the possibility exists. We have to account for that. We're rapidly, the window is closing. This is why I felt compelled to come to this conference, because I don't think there's going to be many more opportunities to have these kinds of gigs in the future, the way things are going. So in a nutshell, I'm going to talk about a number of subjects. Unpacking this alien symbol language is key, I feel. The information is there. We should tap into it. And not only that, but what's to stop us once we begin that process of unpacking and relearning these alien symbol languages? What's to stop us from disrupting the comms communications of the enemy? What's to stop us from identifying their communication systems, which I just talked about? Dan Sherman, back in the early 70s, he was talking to these ETs in a black, dark gray, as Dan Sherman called it, a gray project involving Zetas and Air Force intelligence, which is not Air Force intelligence, Air Force Security Service, one of the components of the NSA. So, point being is that all that information is there. It's locked up within all these MyLab secret space veterans all over the place. Let's tap into that, and then let's start to just turn this thing around. For example, there have been a number of times when these military spooks have been tweaking knobs, punching buttons, but because the MyLab that they were interested in was really attuned with a heightened psi ability, they were able to pick up all of those buttheads are tuning into me again. They could even see under the third eye vision military people at controls at some installation somewhere on or off world, pressing buttons, tweaking knobs. And then I've been told, and I have no reason to doubt this, they did some kind of psi kind of counterattack against them, discombobulated them, right? And I don't see anything wrong with that. Why is it okay? Why should we always be on the receiving end, taking it on the chin over and over? These sewer scum need to know what it's like to be on the receiving end of all this abuse, right?
Yeah.
Another friend of mine, he's one of us. He's in my lab, and haven't spoken to him for ages. I don't know if he's on this side of the veil anymore, but he was a California surfer dude, San Diego, in a property management. So we spent a lot of time in his houseboat, right? And he was plugged into this Black Ops. Well, they tried to plug him into a Black Ops project. He didn't want to go along with it. They started blasting him with voice to skull, all this other stuff, as well as the black helicopter surveillance. And we know in our field, they're not always helicopters. Some of these, what seem to be black helicopters, are really alien craft. They're just disguised. And so on one occasion, he was on his houseboat off San Diego, and he just wants to relax, and these black helicopters show up. He got so frustrated, was so sick of the abuse, that he did some kind of mind connection and affected the controls of that those black helicopters, and made them start zigzagging all over the sky, almost made them lose control and crash. And then they just gave up and said, well, we'll come back another day. Point being is it shows that whether someone's tweaking knobs and then, we can conduct a counterattack, or someone or something is buzzing around with helicopters, mysterious black helicopters that may not be helicopters, we can do a counterattack psychically, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. We have to get past this notion of, we have to help these black ops oppressors, like raise their vibrations and get them to the next. No, they're either trying to get rid of us, or if we're still around, plug us into the Borg collective, and either option is unacceptable, right? The paradigm they chose on this occasion wasn't like simple alien invasions like they've done in countless other worlds. On this particular occasion, post the most recent series of celestially driven cataclysms, right on the cusp again, volcanic activity, seismic activity going through the roof all over the place, not a coincidence. Absolutely convinced part of the reason is the second planet system, Nibiru Nemesis, call it what one will, and that system may itself be inhabited. Okay, that's a whole other story. But point being is that the window is not only closing for us, the window is closing for these controllers. They have to get everything in place, and they're starting to make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, we need to capitalize on that. So let's turn this thing around. And also, if you can tap into the information field to that extent, you can not only can you do like blind remote targeting on my labs that are consenting. What about blind remote targeting of these bung munches that are tweaking the knobs? Let's dox them. Let's find out what their names are, who their bosses are, where they're located. Let's disrupt their lives. Did I say that out loud? Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Let's fuck up their interpersonal relationships, right?
That's a good point, right?
Right. I mean, the kid gloves have kind of come up. They're trying to get rid of us, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that basically is going to be the substance of my speech. And I've talked too much, and I'll pass it on to my.
That was amazing, Nate. Did you want to retort to that? Oh wait, James. Do you have a USB-C charger by any chance?
Well,
it would be like one of these, like the fat charger. You know what I mean? The USB-C. I might have to plug in. I have like 20. Let me see. I have like it's down here in Florida. Your phone drains so fast. You know what I mean? That'll work.
Okay.
Wait. Let me see. Let me see what it looks like. That will work. Yeah.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be able to film us. I would just have to I would have to let the phone down and let it just play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That might be better.
Plug it in here, and then we'll.
Yeah, we're live. I'll get you. We'll talk for Nate for a little bit, and then I'll plug in when I have to, and then we'll just all talk.
I think you can prop it right here while it's charging too.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Thanks, James. And yeah. Should then I can just plug in, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah. Thanks, man. That's awesome. Yeah. Let me set up. Thanks, guys.
No IT, whether it's iPhone or not.
No, we're good. We're on regular thing. Okay, I'll move back so I can be a little bit. Okay, there we go. So yeah, Nate. Right, so you were gonna talk over the other side. So. And Nate just did his presentation, guys. It was amazing. He spoke. It was amazing. He spoke about this reincarnation trap and the simulation and my labs, and it was amazing. It was really good. Well,
it wasn't as good as I hoped because about a third of my stuff got deleted before I even got out of the hotel room and did the presentation about 45 minutes before I was supposed to go on. But I did the best I could with it, so I'm gonna have to make up for it in the future. But what I was talking about is that I had memories that were actually real memories. One involves a soul transference memory, and the other one involves a type of it was a get together for envoys. It was a going away party, and I was talking about how they obfuscated my perception of these memories. Like the soul transference memory was injected in me at a very young age as a child, probably just before the abduction started or right around that time. And the first one was in a white haze, didn't have a lot of context to it. What I did remember of it was taken from me. And then later in my life, when I was late teens, early 20s, I started having a series of flashbacks where they replaced the memory with a new version of it. I still had the censorship. Their faces were shaded sometimes with squares and rectangles over their faces. And but I was given a more of a clear context, and I could see that it was a medical setting. So the concept of heaven fell away. And what they were doing is they were slowly and methodically taking me into basically you can call it a false memory overlay if you like. It was a false perception of these memories. Now they were real memories, so they resonated with me, but they were altered in some way. So, so anyway, what they were doing was they were trying to get me to believe that I had this life mission to come in and do. It's going to be a spiritual teacher or whatever. Over time, as they portrayed themselves as ETs, and the contact became progressively more abusive, they would set me up to do this whole thing and then sabotage me. So when I first started going on your podcast, I was under that premise that I was an ET contactee. I was talking about Hajian ETs, which I firmly believe now, if they do exist, they're probably not called Hajians. Nonetheless, I don't think that they were describing to me is accurate, even remotely true. I think it was like a false identity overlay. So they were constructing a false reality and a false persona for myself to be. Therefore, they could engineer consent out of me to do whatever they wanted, because it became a dependent relationship. I was dependent on them for answers and information about myself. I wasn't allowed to remember. I was abused in many, many different ways, which I don't like to talk about. But nonetheless, they created a false sense of self, a false reality for me to live in. And the premise of my discussion today was to talk about how they use that as a way of looping me back into the reincarnation cycle. So then I got into discussing about the differences between my labs when they die, as well as regular people. And regular people, you could also say starseeds, because if the starseed is not in the programs, they're not going to give them special attention when they die. They're going to be recycled through the normal means, which is the light tunnel and so forth. So I got into comparing and contrasting that a little bit. The main difference that I've observed is that, and this is from friends in the community that have had NDEs, is that they hit you with a frequency and they make you temporarily forget. It's either done just moments before you die or shortly after, at which point, the light appears, and then, what is that noise?
It sounds like they're doing construction out there, Yeah,
it reminds me of Tony Sayers.
They're tunneling.
Yeah, exactly. It's the NPC. They're out there working. There's an NPC work crew. It sounds like they're drilling. But anyway, what I was saying is that they were creating this false persona for me to aspire to be. So therefore, they had control. Therefore, I would go with them when I died. And so that was the idea. And then, of course, as I gained back my own authority over myself, and I began to see through this with the help of others inside the community, I began to have these epiphany moments. I began to break free of this and realize that they were engineering my consent to do this to me. So when you take that consent away and you renege on those contracts, you begin to take your own power back. You start to take control back over your life. So that was part of my discussion of the engineering of consents and how they manipulate you and they give you consents, whatever, like a variety of ways. But if you're in the MyLab programs, one of the things that they'll do, and they tried this to me, was to give me a Stockholm Syndrome treatment, to get me to make it feel good to be in the programs. And they would do type of mind-altering, emotionally altering procedures to you. When I say procedures, I mean they were doing something remotely. I talked about at the presentation, I talked about when you sleep, how they program you. Okay, so that's a good example of it. I've had many instances where I've either been in meditation, just been relaxing, or I fall asleep and I wake up, and as I'm waking up, I'm realizing I'm in a void. I'm with a being, and the being is talking to me, but I'm not myself. I'm very suggestive. I'm in a very suggestive state, and I'm not asking the questions that I normally would if I had my wits about me. So this is a programming session. So that what they're doing is they're programming you, and it's like a hypnotic suggestion. It's like talking to somebody and doing hypnosis. So when I was coming out of this, when I was sleeping and waking up, it's only getting a couple hours sleep a day. I was shortly before the conference. They were progressively trying to sabotage me by making me feel worse and worse and worse about what I was doing. And everybody around me, the naysayers, are telling me I shouldn't be doing this. You're mentally ill. You've got all these issues. They don't understand what's going on. But everything that people said, which I believe that they were being artificially heightening their emotions and manipulating their belief systems, especially over time, people who live with me and so forth, family members, friends who've seen me in situations that just doesn't make sense, because if they ask me what's wrong, I'm pretty open. I tell them I'm being targeted by the U.S. military MILAB programs by extraterrestrials as a MILAB. So it goes right over their head, and they immediately think you've got personal issues, you've got a mental illness, you're blaming your health problems on an unseen force. You're not taking responsibility for yourself. You're making it sound worse than it is. So some of the things that we have to deal with in these situations is the feedback from others. And it's often very, very negative because they don't understand. And that's one of the purposes of this conference, is to change minds and also to change lives. Because the people involved in this, they're going through the life-changing events, and they need to be shifted to the positive. So the point is to make people realize that they have greater control as a military MILAB victim than they previously thought. Because the way they do this, we're creator beings, we create our own reality, but we also co-create a reality. So the idea is the way they trick us is to get us to create the reality that they want us to have. And that's pretty much what engineering consent is. You're giving consent away when you don't have to. And for people that feel like there's no way out of this, especially TIs, you're not going to be able to stop some of the stuff that's going on with you, but you can take control back in your life and change your perspective. You can think positive, but you can make positive change in your life. And it requires you to really stand in your power as a soul, as a sovereign soul. And with, the power of the creator with you, you can do a lot more than you think. There's people who get abducted and they invoke whatever religion they're in, whatever, it could be Jesus, could be Allah, whatever it happens to be. And the abduction actually ends in a lot of cases. You don't hear much about this because our community is fairly secular in a lot of ways. And we need to bring the Christian side into this too. There's a lot of UFO researchers, abduction researchers who go at this from a more of a theological point of view. They hold a piece of the truth just like everybody else, but we need to be under the same umbrella. So hopefully next year, maybe we'll see some more of those people here like that.
I like Timothy Alberino, the one who I think he was the guy who went down. He investigated the Peru. Did you have an opinion? I was going to ask. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to ask him. Did you have an opinion on that? Let me see if I can get on the face peelers.
Yes, I have no reason to doubt that what the villagers in that remote part of the Peruvian jungle are saying is exactly what's going on. That they may have different terms for the beings that are doing all this. They may think of them more in like demonic terms, but it seems to me if they're flying around on these miniature, platform sled kind of thingies, that's some form of technology. And this has been going on. We have to look at this from a historical perspective. Colares Island in the Amazon Delta. Thousands of people who witnessed a UFO invasion. Many people were zapped by light beams from these craft. And one of the things, some of the people even died, and many people were injured. And there was a female doctor there in Brazil who was helping these victims, right? And she found a commonality amongst many of them was extreme loss of iron in their blood cells, right? So there's something to that, I believe. So suddenly all these people get zapped by light beams, and then suddenly the iron contact, they become extremely anemic. Like, what's that?
That's weird. Yeah,
it is weird.
And then they say like if you wear iron, it helps. I don't know if you guys ever heard this. If you wear iron, it helps take away like entities and stuff like that.
Yeah, it goes back to the Middle Ages when people used to keep. In fact, I've got iron horseshoes at home. Right?
Do you keep them by your like bed or anything like that? To so you believe it works then?
Yeah. What they did in Old England was they would put them in the cots of newborns precisely to keep the children from being taken by the fairies, the wee folk, right? The fae, whatever they call them.
Do you think those were just grays, or do you think they could have been an interdimensional?
They could have been other abducting entities. So yes, long story short, I think Alberino's done great work. He, fortune favors the bold. He happens to speak the particular dialect that those villagers speak in that remote part of Peru. That's an absolute bonus, right?
Yeah.
So I think that he's done superb work down there. I reached out to him, I think, and asked him to come on the show, but I haven't heard anything back. So if anyone out there listening, if you know him, put in a good word for the cosmicswitchboard.com.
Yeah, and Nate, you made a good point. Like we need to get more Christian researchers involved. I think they have a piece of the puzzle too, right?
Absolutely. If you look at just the theories of reality, like sin theory, string theory, M theory, that was the other side. I can't think off the top of my head. The electric universe theory. There's truth in all of these,
Yes.
and there's truth in every one of these genres of research. And we need everyone's perspective, not just a couple. We need to get rid of get rid of the secular only stuff, and go into the more of the spiritual, but not so much the New Age. We need to get more Christian people in there.
Yeah, I agree.
Perspective, and they're more about standing in your power than anything else, because they do recognize more than anybody else that this is pretty much at the core of it. It's very demonic.
Is it
in the philosophy and just what we're dealing with? Not to the extent that they say it is, because they'll blame it all on demons. That's the problem. We need to get everybody together talking and realize that it's all of the above, and that's what we need to be focusing on. Another thing too, James has talked about the need to come together and actually get organized, and I've been 100% behind that. We need more cohesion, more cohesiveness in this community. We really need to be a more tightly knit community, which is why this conference is so important, because it gives everybody a chance to speak. You don't have to be a big name to be in this conference. You just have to be part of this, and that's what's most important. And the other part that I was talking about, I say the last third of the presentation, it had to do with after death and what happens. And I've said for a while now that if you really want to bleed out these programs and take the assets out of them, you have to leave. When somebody dies, they have to be prepared to get out. And we need to put a lot of emphasis on that. So there's a whole field of research with NDEs, and that need to be brought under the umbrella here. We need to have people speaking like that. We need to have a broader reach. We need to have a broader scope here, because everybody's got a piece of this. And what I was suggesting is strategies on how to get out of the system, how to get out of the simulation. When you pass away and you go into this void, what to do. And one of the important things that I talked about is that because the system, I believe, is AI, it's artificially intelligent. It's a type of augmented reality overlay. It's not that we're in a computer simulation. It's just there's a computer simulation overlaid over the organic universe, the source field universe, which is much more of a fluid reality than what we deal with here. And what we deal with here is forced entropy, which means that's the life and death cycle, but it's applied to us in such a way that it's parasitic in nature and very, very containing. So you're stuck in a body. You don't have the upward mobility to leave this simulated reality that we're in. Our religions tell us that suicide is wrong. Of course, it's wrong to kill yourself, but you also have to recognize too that it is a foreign concept for a lot of people to realize, and especially for me as a child when I tried to figure this out. Why do you have a soul in a body? Just one being. What is the purpose of this? And the longer I live, the more I realize that these are containment vessels. They're not freedom. When I looked at my research about ETs before there was any contact, I had abduction contact and then simulated ET contact with military handlers. But just looking at other people's reports and just knowing, the inner knowing of this, they have the technology that defies our laws of physics. So, what's going on with that? That needs to be heavily questioned. We need to look into that, because how could there be two laws of physics unless we're dealing with a simulated reality, two different levels?
You mean like the one that the UFOs have and the one that we have?
Well, we're told that the conservation of energy, there's no room there for free energy. Everything's finite, not infinite.
Yeah.
And so that's like putting somebody in debt, telling them that they have financial freedom. It doesn't work, which is another way to contain people. The economic system, the social system, the political system, we're fed a false reality at multiple levels. So what people talk about in the surface level truther community, they talk about a matrix. They only go so far with it. They go to the economic system. They talk about a lot of them don't even talk about the religions, because they have, they're immersed in it and can't see it for what it is. They can't see that it's a distortion of true spirituality, because it's teaching us to hate one another and to feel that we're different because we're of a different tribe, a different religion. If you read the Bible, it talks about, God is ordering different groups to go to war with each other. That's not a divine being that would do that. That's something that is obfuscating the message of Jesus in the first place. So I may sound like a Christian researcher. I don't affiliate myself with any organized religion because of the problems that are innate in it. But anyway, talking about the void, what I was getting into saying is that when you're in the void, it's a zone that's very, very calm, it's very, very still. And you're, for the most part, on stage. You're like center stage. And you're there by yourself, as it appears. But it's a augmented reality overlay over top of the void. So there's a real transition phase that you go through in depth. But it's being hijacked. So it's diverting you from going back to source, back to the organic source field universe, we're going to call it that. And it's pulling you back into a reincarnation trap. So the way you would combat that is you would calm your energy output. Just like dealing with parasites, an astral parasite, or that's attached to you. That's attached to you. Say like it's feeding off of your trauma. If you heal from that trauma, the parasite falls away like an old scab because it can't continue to feed off of you. You're not putting out the resonance that it needs. So it fades away or it moves on. It's the same thing in the void. You don't feed, there's that old saying, don't feed the trolls, or don't feed the tunnel of light. Don't feed the AI. Calm yourself, become still. You can turn away from it. If it pulls you into it, like some people report, you have the authority to scream stop. And but the thing is that people are programmed before they die because of religions and just a general belief system. And also, more importantly, too, for those people who look outside of religion and outside, the regular belief systems, there's a lot of people that have NDEs. And these people become influencers. And the problem here is that the AI will profile, the AI, which is in conjunction with the ET presence, will profile these people. That's why only a small percentage of the population has an NDE. So they profile them, they find the charismatic ones that are proper to relay the message to the masses. And then there's a second tier of people that have the experience, but only talk to a few friends, maybe a few family members, and never really do much with the information. I've met 2 people like that in the course of my life. One was a suicide attempt. The other one was a heart attack. And but anyway, if you go online and you watch the different people out there, there's no shadow banning because they're not a threat to the system, so they're not suppressed. So their message gets out, and they tell people about all these different realities that you can go into after you die. They had in their NDE, they saw these. I'm suggesting that these realities are AI-generated loop realities. So, in other words, if you have somebody who's a Christian patriot, and they go into the tunnel, they may not be recycled right away and put back in the human body. They may be put into a virtual reality experience where everything is just right, everything's exactly the way they believe it is, but it isn't, but there's something wrong with it. Of course, you could have a reality that feels very real, but it doesn't have any weight to it. There's no gravity. You don't feel like you're walking, it doesn't feel physical. Or maybe the people around you don't have depth in them, because it's simply a virtual Truman Show type reality. There's all these different levels of this nested simulation that people go into in these NDEs, the purpose of which is to come back and to tell everybody else, hey, it's great. There's nothing to worry about. Go into the tunnel, relax, you're fine. But in fact, what you're doing is you're bypassing God, you're bypassing going back to source, you're bypassing going back to maybe you identify with a civilization out there in the cosmos and that's where you want to go. You're bypassing that. And you're giving up your power and going into the tunnel, at which point if you consent to it, it takes your memory and it puts you wherever it wants to. And, NPCs is another good example. I think NPCs are people that have conformed to the system, conformed to this reality to the point where it's drained them of their really who they are, their original self, and they just become a programmed person. They're a real person, they're a soul, they're in a body, just like you and I. But at the same time, they don't have any of the spiritual inclinations. They don't seem to care that the system is broken. They don't seem to care that people are suffering. It's just whatever I can get for myself. They've succumbed to the program. Now, there's reports of people seeing being or people that vanish and, they're not real. They're projections of a simulated reality. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the conformists in reality that just don't get it. And these people are necessary within the system because you need the backdrops. You need the people that keep the system going to control the other parts, the other portion of the population that's questioning things. But anyway, you have the right to question in that void. You can control it if you recognize that, and you have to stand in your power. So you would calm your energy. You wouldn't show any emotion. You wouldn't panic. Don't panic. It's the last thing you need to do, because the AI presence or the AI system is going to pick all of that up. It catalogs you when you come in. So if you come in here for a life mission, and it automatically captures you, it catalogs you, and it puts you in a container body. It'll put you someplace. Sometimes it can even put you in a stasis state. And I have some memories of that I've been figuring out for a long time. It started out, I had repeated nightmares as a young boy, and I felt like I was it was that story from scripture, Jonah, Jonah and the whale, I think?
Yeah, I remember that.
In the whale's belly. Well, I thought it was a pre-birth memory, and I thought I was going through the birth canal. So is what I initially thought. And over the time, I realized that was a type of soul containment system that I was in prior to being put into this physical body. And the way it felt is that you were put into a forced dream state where you're virtually just intoxicated. It's like being put into anesthesia. And when you fight through that, it feels like you're being compressed. You don't have the urge to breathe, but you literally feel like you're being compressed and like you're suffocating in some other form, another way.
Wow.
And then the only way to get out of that miserable feeling is to go back to the dream state, which is to be unconscious. And then you're kept in stasis. And of course, then I was put into this body, and then all hell breaks loose from there. But the thing is you don't want to be reincarnated like that. You have the right to go back to source. So the question is, for my labs, what do they do versus regular people? Regular people need to shed the programming. They can find God without organized religion very much better than they can going into a church. And there's nothing wrong in going to a church, but if you go in there to absorb all of the dogma, you're going to miss the forest because the trees are in the way. So you're going to miss the point. The dogma is there to distort the message, and the people preaching it, some of them don't even realize that. Some actually put a lot of emphasis on it. Love one another, take care of each other. Don't judge each other. Treat your neighbor the way you wanted to be treated yourself. There's a lot of great things in that book that, a lot of great ways to live. And we need to do that. But at the same time, we cannot take the Old Testament and this other stuff to heart and stone children and do other things like that. We can't live unfortunately, like people live in the Middle East. And we certainly can't let them come into our country and take over and force it on us, because to them it's a holy war. And
you know what? I was going to say that's what my friend Indigo Angel's been talking about a lot. She's a woman, but she's been going really hard on Islam lately. She thinks it's that Iran is a reptilian portal Stargate system or something like that.
System of human suppression.
Yeah. So it's they suppress women like that, right?
For all the guys out there, imagine if it was reversed.
Yeah, it would be. It's horrible. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it throws people out of balance. You can't preach love and then preach hate at the same time. I watched a guy. It was some type of event. There was a table. This guy was promoting Islam. And this man walks up, and he said something out of kilt with whatever the guy, something that the man who was Islamic took as an insult. I don't remember what it was, but it was something that could have just been an honest mistake. The guy went from being happy and smiling and very friendly to reaching over the table and literally trying to hit him. He was trying to grab and hit him. He was getting violent. It's because his religion tells him to do that. It's a religion of war and violence that preaches dominance. That's what it is. And that's the reptilian type of way of looking at things. Conquer and destroy and then take over.
You talk about that as well, James, right?
Yes, clearly. It's this guy's form of ball worship is what it is. It is an extreme form of misogyny. Child bride taking is the norm. Slavery is the norm. And the conquered or soon to be conquered, if they don't convert, then they get beheaded and they get killed from enslaved, whatever the case may be. And the whole culture has been weaponized. It's always been there, right? But now it's just being moved all over the place in in European heritage countries, and these communist Marxist regimes all over the Western world are deliberately allowing them in, suppressing the locals, their rights, bringing them in to affect change. And it's just change by the sword. I mean, think of the Moorish invasion of Spain. We're having a replay of that, where modern day Moors are running around with machetes and attacking white Europeans for absolutely no reason, because that's their creed, that's their dogma. And what happens is in Europe, which is in England in particular, it's been totally taken down by Islam because of the social engineering and the powers that be deliberately moving hordes of these invaders who don't want to assimilate. They don't want to assimilate with the native culture. They want to subjugate the native culture. So in infrequent times that they actually arrest some of these Islamic militants and put them in prison, they quickly take the prisons over because there's enough of them in there. Whenever a critical mass of them is reached in any locale, be it a village, town, that's what they're moving them all into, not just the big cities, but also in prison. If, say, a normal Briton is offended and, just alarmed by all this, puts out a tweet or a post, and then he's arrested and thrown into prison, and then he's surrounded by all these Islamists, you either convert infidel or kill you, and he's in prison, right? Then what? He either converts or he's killed. See, for so long in the Western cultures, males have been emasculated. The real masculinity has been beaten down. It's been replaced by this toxic, I don't even want to call it femininity, it's just this entity infestation, whack job version of feminism. And it's completely subverted and turned the whole Western culture upside down and made it that much more ripe for conquest by all these invaders being moved in who, I mean, they don't even realize they're pawns in a game.
This girl, Angerhaven, she's in the chat. Her name's Angerhaven Joya. She says that she's from over in the UK. She says I'm reading her comment. She says there's more mosques than churches now.
Oh, yeah.
But they're doing the same thing in Canada. I know, and then they're doing it here too.
Yes. So people need to ask, what was the Battle of Britain about? What was the Normandy invasion about? Right? So we have to realize we've been played at a major level. And the two-tiered system in the UK in particular, where, it's catch and release. These freaks are running around with machetes and hacking people, throwing acid in the faces of women.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, because, why? Because the women aren't veiled. In their scheme of things, a woman has to be covered like a. But
it's interesting. Like if you again going back to my friend Indigo Angel, she showed like one time the women from those areas like before that there was like this radical Islam taking over. That wasn't their traditional garb, right? They all wore like beautiful dresses and stuff like that, and they had like they were like
each had their own culture.
Yeah, but then there's some point where they like all these radical Islam countries like teamed up and they said, okay, we're going to have women wear hijabs, and they all agreed to it, and it's insane.
Let's just leave it at this. I won't elaborate further, but Black Ops elements in the Western world were responsible for the spread of Islam. Absolutely responsible.
But I thought we were responsible for putting the Shah in place, and then the Muslims overthrew the Shah in Iran.
That was Operation Ajax. But there's a school of thought. There's a good article in Global Research. .ca that were written by an Iranian guy, and he talked about how MI6, CIA, and Mossad and other groups actually played a role in the Iranian Revolution. Because think about it, if Iran right now was a westernized country, women walking around with skirts and more makeup and what have you, what's the justification for waging war on them?
Yeah,
exactly.
Right? Exactly, because they're a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's perfectly within their right to generate nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, right? But that's all gone out the window because people in the Western world are so dumbed down, brainwashed, they don't actually do the research, find out how we wound up in this deep smell situation in the first place. But getting back to the point about Islam being weaponized, like Islam doesn't have the assets They can't fly. They can't fly over. They have to be flown over. They can't. They can come over on some little raft or something and cram about 90 of them on a small raft, but they have to be allowed in. And there's all these NGOs, these Catholic relief agencies, Jewish relief agencies, Christian. They're all in name only. And the UN facilitate the transfer of all these people. Not only do they not want to assimilate, they want to outright take over. And you're talking about small populations to begin with in Europe, in the UK, in Ireland, right? And then you bring in these people, and look, I've always felt that there's a filth quotient to people that are entity infested, right? So you look at places like in Paris has been like this for a while now, right? Because of the North African influence. But if you look at places in the UK now, the amount of filth and pollution in the streets, because that's what they're used to, right? We're used to cleanliness, hygiene. It's a facet of our upbringing, of our spiritual foundation. You want to have a clean residence and clean surroundings. That's completely backwards opposite from where they come from. Everywhere they go is nothing but filth, pollution, contamination, violence. And you know what? It's like, I'm not saying, as you reap, so shall you sow. But this is what happens post-World War II. All these European parliaments get filled up with socialists and communists. They just changed their names. They weren't commies anymore. They were social democrats, right? I mean, look at the first major election post-World War II in France. Fully a third of the voters voted communist, right? So in a very real way, I don't hate to say that they brought it upon themselves, but man, it's like they need to think what cultural Marxism and communism is all about. They just want to get rid of Christianity, get rid of ethnic European heritage completely, because white people are bad, white privilege, all that bullshit that we keep hearing. Fine. You think white privilege is bad? Stop driving cars. Stop using cell phones. Stop riding in subways and everything else, because white people brought that into existence, right? And I'm man enough to recognize that. I admire Western culture and civilization because it brought us out of the dark ages and gave us these modern creature comforts, which we otherwise wouldn't have. So we need to fight for this. Every culture and every people in Europe need to fight for their national identity. It seems to me, it's easy for me to say, but it seems to me some of them are more worried about getting arrested or offending somebody than in the old days. Protecting your family and your village and your clan, that's what men did.
Yeah, that was the number one priority.
But now it's called toxic masculinity, and now it's called white privilege.
And the invasion is called cultural enrichment.
Cultural enrichment. So getting decapitated, mutilated, gang raped, and it's all being enabled.
I heard about that again. My friend Indigo Angel talks about that. She said that there were gangs of men raping like 14-year-old girls over in the UK.
It's monstrous. It's monstrous.
Yeah.
So, and that is an example of this reptilian overlordship. Like, why would there be such different cultural traditions?
Yeah.
Why in certain parts of the world, certain ethnicities, let's just call a spade, right? Certain cultures, certain religions, more demonic and more sadistic than others, right? Why can't they, if they do come over, why don't they bring over engineers and technicians? Well, they don't have them. I mean, the average IQ in a lot of those North African Islamic countries, it's like so low. It's not even it's funny. And
it's a lot of that's because of genetic inbreeding.
There's a lot of consanguinity is the norm.
Yeah.
Pakistan, example. It's like inbreeding, brother, sister, niece, uncle, etc. It's the norm. So they just keep reinforcing that mentality genetically, and there's a what do you call it? A family. What's the term for family possession for generational curses? Like there's something to the notion of generational curses from a Christian perspective when you have that mentality, that culture, which says that it's perfectly okay to marry. They rescued Iraq by getting rid of Hussein, and now they openly have child bride taking at 9 years old. Right?
That's insane. That's sickening.
Great job.
9 years old.
Great job of liberating Iraq, right?
Yeah, they did nothing.
They did,
A million people dead, and then everything else.
The southern part is overrun by Shias. The central part is overrun by Sunni jihadists. The northern part is overrun by Kurds. right? So Kurds have been playthings of Western intelligence for decades now. I know it's unpopular, but that's the way. But please, I didn't want to shift it.
It seems like a lot of those Middle Eastern countries, like, they have like some of them have like extreme wealth, like Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi. I know some of the UFC, like the MMA fighting goes over there. So I've watched shows in Riyadh or shows in Abu Dhabi and stuff like that. It's because they like it, but like, why is it that it seems like it's even worse over there where only a few have the money, but like you said, the rest of the people are living in like extreme poverty.
Well, yeah,
I see gold plated cars. Yeah. Which is absurd. There's no spirituality there.
No,
it's higher.
It's all just made up.
Yeah.
The House of Saud has only been in existence since the 1930s, 1940s. It was propped up by a renegade for British intelligence, and then he enabled the State Department to get the deal for what became the Arab American Oil Corporation, which became embedded with the Saudi royals. I mean, look how many dilettante Saudi princes there are. There's thousands of them. They're billionaires. They don't have to work. They're just playboys. They drink. They eat pork. They go to nightclubs. They're not very Islamic, right?
Right.
And so those are exactly the types that have been sponsored, financed, and moved around by Western intelligence, right? That fulfills their dream of this so-called clash of civilizations. Albert, Pike talked about that. So, really, Europe. I'm very much a committed Europhile and Anglophile. I love the history of Great Britain, of Germany, what have you. I feel that I've had past lives in some of those places. So to see what's become of it, where like it's not even they're encouraging women, native European women, European girls in the UK and elsewhere to stay indoors, to cover up.
Yeah.
They're saying don't walk dogs, it offends Islam. Who gives a shit, right? So like at some point, right? People just have to stand up, because you either stand up or it's either slavery of the worst sort, right?
Mm-hmm.
Christians are being massacred all over the world right at this moment. Nigeria, all over the place. They're just getting slaughtered, right? And nobody is saying a peep about that. What's your background?
My dad was Lebanese, but he was Christian Lebanese, and then my mom's Greek and Italian. So
but is there any Armenian in your?
No.
Okay, but then you understand, because that part of the world.
Well, I grew up listening to I supposedly had cousins who were Christian Lebanese, and they told me about in the 80s about the civil war between the Muslims. Yes. You know what I mean? And I heard about the Armenian genocide too.
Yeah, the Armenian genocide, and then the CIA concocted this coup in Lebanon. There used to be like a happy kind of union between the Druze, between the Shias, between the Christians, until the CIA engineered a coup there. And then what it's done is it's basically enabled the jihadists to take over, because they outbreed us, right? They have multiple wives. Yeah. So if you have these labor liberal type communist politicians, they bring them in and say, here's the deal. You can rape, you can pillage, do whatever you want, just vote for us, okay? That's the deal, and then we'll get you out of jail and what have you. It's a really sick, demented system, and the veil has come off. It's like, this is what we're doing. If you don't like it, tough, right? So I'm glad that this came up, because it's all part and parcel of the earth as a prison, a closed system that you've been talking about.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have to be like this. We're in the 22nd century already. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's all part of a grand design. It's order out of chaos in an AI system to lock it down, because you've got all this illegal immigration, and this isn't an anti-immigrant discussion. It's not an anti-Islam discussion. I think everyone in this room has been every color under the sun at some point, somewhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. We probably all have lived past lives where we are all different kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
We're just wearing a different clothing. That's it for the soul. That's all it is. But there's a design to that. You have all the illegal immigrants being lied to, and the fun is to come up here. You got no place for them to go, no room in the system for such a massive amount of people who haven't been vetted. You don't know who you're getting. You're getting terror cells. You're getting a lot of things. And for the most part, the main majority of that group are just people trying to get to escape a simulated problem. And when I say simulated, nothing to do with simulation. It has to do with cutting off funding at the IMF level to countries so that they can't develop. They keep them in poverty. They keep them corrupt. They keep putting different people in there. The intelligence agencies do this, and they turn these countries into third world crap holes, and then they entice people to come up here with false promises to collapse the social system up here. And with Islam and the things that are going on in Europe, they're bombing the hell out of these people.
Yes, then they bring them over.
And then they
pissed off to
call
begin
them
with.
refugees, and then they lie to us. Well, there's climate refugees coming from the south. The view tells everybody that the equator is so hot it's like hell. Everybody's fleeing. These people are. Joy Behar couldn't find her ass with both hands. That's my opinion. But it's all part of a grand design. It's order out of chaos, because if they can get an homogenized culture of drones and people fighting, when I say drones, I mean you have the people who just go along with everything, buy into it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have these aggressive types that come in from Islamic countries, and you've got immigrants coming up here who feel like they deserve what we have, when there's no reason that I'd like to move down there, but the countries are ruined. So what do? It's order out of chaos. They want a one world government. They want a police state that's run by AI, and how they're going to clean up all of this government corruption, which is all institutionalized, all this waste, fraud, and abuse, and then all this illegal immigration and the migrant cry. How you fix it all is you create a new world order, a world government, a one world religion, if you will. Maybe it's Islam, maybe it's something else. Whatever it is, or maybe it's just pure atheism and you're worshiping a computer god. You become like, the government becomes God, and the government is an AI computer system. That's what they're gunning for. That's what they want. That's the grand design of this, is to take down human civilization and lock it down. They don't like Christianity because there's things in Christianity that literally break the code. It breaks this simulation or matrix reality that we're in, because it has certain key behavioral beliefs that if you put into action, would fundamentally transform things. And you can find stuff like that in Islam and Judaism as well. There's a message there that's been distorted as well. It's not, I'm not putting one religion above the other. I'm putting that key fundamental, belief system of how to treat and how to live with one another. And they want to get rid of that, because they want the government to play God, and they want to make the rules. And that's what this is really about. That's the end game to this.
Yeah.
And they divide people. I'm just to the point now where I say, what's next? And a couple of years ago, I said, yeah, they'll be trying to keep criminals on the streets, and they'll say it's to preserve democracy or something. And here they are doing it.
Look what they did in California. Just interject for a second during the lockdowns. Like everyone else got to be locked down. Oh, but we care so much about the prisoners in our prisons in such confined quarters. Like COVID's going to spread like wildfire. Let's let them all out.
Yeah.
And these murderers and pedophiles. Yeah, well, that doesn't make sense. You're locking everyone down, but you care about them so much. You're letting them all. Right? So I learned a long time ago not to inject logic into this, because if you're looking at it from like a spiritual, somewhat soul embedded human being, and you try to inject logic. No, it's you have to look at it at times and not get corrupted in the process.
Look at the end result.
Look at how they're doing it and why they're doing it. The agenda behind it. You start to get into their mind. That's why I studied the work of FBI profilers, the original founding members of the Behavioral Sciences Unit, Roy Hazelwood, John Douglas, people like that, because I want to get into the mind of these reptilian hybrid, Draco hybrid serial killers, right? What makes them tick? And so there's entire cultures like that, right? Entire cultures like that.
Right, where it's normalized.
Where it's normal. So you bring them all in, and you just tamp down any dissent, any resistance.
Create special rules for
Special
different classes
rules.
of people.
Different classes of people, and the people who've been, funding all this, there's all public money that's being done under.
Right, and we thought it was the billionaires, actually spending their own money. That was the storyline. Turns out we're paying for it.
Oh yeah, exactly.
They would be broke. Why do they keep getting richer while they're spending all this money?
Yeah. So you have all these taxes up foundations, NGOs, right? They're getting paid with public money to do all this stuff. It's grotesque.
And Doge didn't take care of the problem. We saw how quickly they regrouped. Yeah, you got what was it, USAID, and then all of a sudden we've got these crazy protests again, and they're linking it to the Harris and Walmart and a few others. But it's probably our tax money just going in a different, direction, from a different direction, funneled through something.
Yeah, people are tired in general of having to pay for the lifestyle of others, and everybody's struggling.
Especially when it's a toxic one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, this kind of degeneracy and this violent religious militancy is being fostered, enabled, and then like the two-tiered system, the people who stand to suffer the most from all this are the ones being persecuted, right? So, like you were talking about, like Minnesota, Minneapolis, train wreck, write it off. Colorado, write it off, train wreck. And now, look who the next mayor of New York City is going to be, train wreck, right?
Yeah, Canada's becoming a complete train wreck.
Yeah.
Well, so is the U.S.
Yeah.
It isn't just Canada; it's everybody at this point.
That's right. So
they're all under the same agenda. They're lockstep into it, except for the Russian Federation, and a few examples or a few alternatives.
Yeah.
But,
in Russia, remember,
they're not perfect either.
Well, it's not perfect, but it's a white society, largely white, proud of their ethnicity and their heritage, and it's a largely Christian country too.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why I hate them so much, right? And just remove Putin out of the equation for a minute. Just look at the Russian people themselves, their heritage, all the abuse and persecution that they put up with all this time. So many attack vectors. Their society has survived all this time, survived like long Bolshevik rule. Think about that, right? So, I mean, nobody knows better than the Russians what Bolshevism is all about. And look at all the members of parliament all throughout the rest of the world. They're a bunch of Bolsheviks. Remember the Red Terror. 100 million minimum of Slavic, white, mostly Christians, annihilated in the Ukraine, throughout what became the East Bloc, right? And you've seen the replay, it never stopped. Just imagine, think about all the casualties sustained just in the First World War alone. Battle of Somme, Flanders, Verdun. These battles lasted for months, hundreds of thousands, literally millions of people in just months-long battles. How many more Europeans would there be right now if that hadn't happened? And then that wasn't even enough. 20 years later, let's start World War II, right? Let's move the Soviet Red Army as far west as they want to go. Enable them. Stand the Western Allied armies down. Let the Russians take Berlin, Prague, Vienna, all these other places, the Soviets, not the Russians, right?
Right.
Yeah, and then communize the West that's supposed to be standing up to communism, but it's really to the funding of all these billionaires who are all communists in mentality.
Set it up so they can take those countries out and
Exactly.
change. It's like in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's right. It's and all this is a reflection, as above, so below. When you go back to Elizabethan literature, right, and Shakespearean literature, like in Macbeth, for example, you would have wild thunder, wild activity in the heavens, because that presaged, in a metaphorical sense, what was going to happen on Earth, like unrest in the heavens, unrest in the earth, right? The Chinese in their culture, they lose the favor of the heavenly kingdom, and so the earthly Chinese kingdom has problems because the bestowing of favors, what have you, has been taken away by the gods. Once again, whatever culture we're talking about. So as above, so below. We're seeing an upsurge all over the world now in UFO activity. And what have they done? Mainstream media has written them all off drones.
Yeah, that's the new excuse.
That's the new excuse. It's drones now. And these surface level type things. Just jump on that bandwagon.
Something that looks like Ezekiel's wheel, and it's like, well, that's a drone.
It's a weird cube-looking thing.
It's either if it is a drone and it's exhibiting its capabilities, then it is something from the military-industrial complex that is based in UFO or ET, technology.
Yes. So it's to say it's purely military technology. That's like putting the cart before the horse.
Right.
Right.
And the timing was perfect because Trump takes office and they stage things and you had Trump. So that was immediately the first thing that happened. It's like, what's next? Alien invasion. Oh, there it is. And what's the end result of that? Just a bogus excuse. I mean, it's to get people on edge. Is what it really is. To get people confused and questioning things, but not questioning things from a learned point of view, questioning things from the television's point of view.
Yes, you give up their power.
Exactly.
Save us. We already went through all that.
Yeah.
The lockdowns, everything. Protect us harder, Daddy.
Right. Beat me some more.
Well, the UFO situation is really going to come to the fore because as time goes on, I predict that there's going to be open conflict in the skies between one or more warring ET factions, and then their proxies here on terra firma will begin their operations. That's why it's so important now, these people that have these abilities, these MyLabs, these people in these off-world projects, what have you, to really come into their power. Stop. What I would like to see is, in general, MyLabs to stop advancing the agenda of the Draco-Orion Empire, which the Earth is a part of. I always zoom out, right? And there's been a lot of. I'd like your thoughts on this, and I don't mean this to be, critical or anything like that. It's just an observation. But just as, excuse me, we see in the surface level special ops community, a lot of these ex-Navy SEALs, they branded themselves, right? They're influencers. They're selling the merch.
Right. We talked about this last night.
Yeah, they're pushing these narratives that advance this globalist agenda, and whether it's intentionally or it's done unconsciously, I'd like your thoughts on this. There seems to have been some degree of branding in the MyLab community as well. I know it's unpopular, and it's probably going to ruffle some feathers even here.
Yeah, it's unpopular to point this out.
Yeah.
We're going in the wrong direction with a lot of these things.
Yeah, because we need to look. We either pull the oars in the same direction, tug on the same length of rope in the same direction, or we're just going to be flying, off the wheel in 7 different directions.
Right. It's be paddling in circles.
Exactly. Right. I mean, the lifeboat only has so much room anyway. Right. So there seems to be a lot of rebranding. I mean, Corey Good, just him alone, just the damage she did. So
that's what I would call a walking virtual temple complex.
Yeah.
For those who don't know what the virtual temple complex is, you take a pyramid, a temple, and you create a religion, and you socially engineer the population. You do it from a regional perspective. A virtual temple complex is the modern version of that. It could be political, it could be religious, alternative spirituality, it could be an extraterrestrial, a cult, or just somebody broadcasting information that's disinfo that gives you a false perspective. But it's a way to socially engineer the population. So there's people being used for this purpose. And you can say Corey Good was one of those because, that's what it turned into.
The whole Gaia TV narrative.
Exactly.
And he's admitted in court that he made up a lot.
Did you guys see that movie? The movie by Darcy Weir. It was called Dark Alliance. It's on Tubi TV. It's free. It shows the whole Corey Good court case. It's pretty good.
Oh, I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's called Dark Alliance.
He was forced to admit that he basically made it up. So what he did basically is.
I think he made a portion of it. I think he embellished himself.
Yeah, absolutely did. Absolutely
He
did.
was in Project Avalon for a while. So was David Wilcock.
Yes. I remember I was in that MyLab group in Project Avalon. I was just observing, really. And that's where he really made his initial impact.
Really did a lot of damage there.
He did.
People, after him, it was just like a wake of destruction. And his attitudes in there was just very cynical and skeptical of anybody that was coming forward with MyLab stories.
Yes.
It was just like, what are they coming in on their forward?
That's right. He became a gatekeeper. It seemed that, everything had to pass muster with him before, it had to have a stamp of approval.
And that's happening in the New Age. They're infusing the New Age contactee stuff. They're infusing it into the MyLab community, creating this type of symbiosis that doesn't benefit either side.
No.
The two need to be exclusively separate because they're dealing with the greatest human rights violation, with the exception of what we talked about here earlier. But I mean, as far as what you can do to a human being and to a human soul, just a soul in general, and what they're doing to these people, including myself and James and others, it's absolutely the worst possible violation you could ever do.
It's heinous, to say the least.
It's the most extreme. And when you bring the love and light in, and you paint these ETs in such a fictional way. You have gurus talking about I'm the only source of true information from this Galactic Federation, and then you have the infighting, the narcissism, and the greed that comes into it.
Yeah,
because once the money flows
He
in,
had hordes of trolls working for him.
yeah,
Google
exactly.
enabled him. How
Yeah,
does that happen?
algorithms open wide, and they suppress us, and they open wide for them.
Well, for example, and I've had a gal on my show talk about this. She was being critical of Corey Goode and his BS, but she was doing it from a YouTube channel that was, basically private. She was using a pseudonym. No one should have known who it was. Next thing you know, people are showing up in a news feed, calling her out by name, talking about her address, and they were doxing her. So Google was helping Corey Goode.
Yeah.
Google was the enemy. Google should never be on your side.
Yeah, exactly.
What they do with us,
Yeah.
they punish us.
Yeah.
But paradoxically, quote unquote, it's enabling Corey Goode and his agenda. What's that all about?
And there's plenty more Corey Goods right now.
Yeah, Corey Goode can't say shit about any of this because he's, before he used to just, wage lawfare and sue you. Well, yeah, you know what? People have countersued you, pal, and look what happened to you.
Right.
So he's called aged about 70 years, and my first thought was, well, instead of a 20 in back program, you should have done a 70 in back program, pal.
Or just a 70 and go away.
Yeah, just a 70 and go away.
Well, this was great, guys. Maybe we should stop here because I want to go check out the conference again and stuff. And I'm sure you guys want to too and everything. And we went for about an hour and 20 minutes. I thought this was pretty good, right?
That's cool.
Yeah.
Truth and verbal carnage for an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, it was awesome. Well, do you guys want to tell everybody where they can follow you and everything? And Nate, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I have a small YouTube channel called Planetary Consciousness Project. It's been shadow banned and I've been targeted, so I'm trying to get back into it, put out some decent content. So you can find me there. You can find me on Facebook. If you want to reach out to me, it's a good way to do it. It's Nathan Ciszek. Nathan spelled the typical way, and then Ciszek is C as in cat, I as in igneous rock, S as in Sam, Z as in zebra, E as in Edward, K as in ketchup. And you can reach me there. Just send me a friend request. Or just send me a message. Try to do a friend request first. That's a little easier because then I'll pay attention to it. And you can also email me through my YouTube channel. If you go to, it should still be a link to reach me. There's also the Planetary Consciousness Project on Telegram. You can sometimes catch me there. I'm not there all the time, but you can reach out to me on Telegram that way. And that's pretty much it for the moment.
All right. And then James?
You can find me at thecosmicswitchboard.com. That's my main site for my podcast. I've got a YouTube channel as well. Just look up James Bartley. And on Facebook, you can find me as well. James Bartley /148 or whatever. Presumably there's 147 James Bartley before me, but whatever. And you can also find me, although like with Nathan, I'm not often on WhatsApp, Telegram, or Instagram, I can be reached. It'll alert me that the messages are in there. So just look me up, James Bartley. That's my real name. So you can find me on those shows. And thank you, Robert, and thank all of your followers and people who follow you. Very valuable show on the live stream right now. Great questions, great commentary.
I just wanted to say, Rob, you actually, I think you inspired this conference, honestly.
You think?
Well,
Yes.
you had that philosophy to let everybody get a chance to speak.
Yes.
And it started something. So I think you've done more than you possibly imagined. Maybe you haven't thought about that, but
Yes.
you were instrumental in a lot of that.
I don't know that. I didn't think of it.
I believe the same thing. Absolutely.
Wow. Thanks, guys. I didn't. Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks.
You've done more than you ever thought you would.
Well, thanks, guys. And I'll try to get one more interview for the audience. I have one more scheduled. I don't know who it's going to be with, but I'll get that later tonight. And so tune in, keep checking, guys, and I'll see you guys later. And thanks, everyone.